NV Energy has been in the headlines a lot lately, most recently for a demand-based change to how you get billed. The impact on Las Vegas bank accounts and their ballots could be huge. So today on CityCast Las Vegas, we talk with Dana Gentry, senior reporter at the Nevada Current, and she explains how your electricity bill could sway the governor's race. It's Tuesday, March 17th. I'm Sonia Cho Swanson, and here's what Las Vegas is talking about. So, Dana, for listeners who are just catching up on all of the news, how would you summarize the issues that Southern Nevadans have had with NV Energy over the last, say, few years?
You know, they're coming off of this, what I would call a public relations debacle with the way they handled the discovery that they had overcharged some customers for as long as 2 decades, a little more than 2 decades. And initially they offered to pay back, I believe, a couple $1 million. And then after the public outcry, they said, okay, we'll go back as far as 2017, but we don't have
a couple million was just a fraction of the overall amount they'd overcharged.
It was $65 million that they had overcharged, $65.4 million that they had overcharged people. So in January, I believe, they said, okay, we'll go back to $17 million. And then they said, we don't have any obligation to pay back everybody all the money that we owe. In the meantime, lawmakers had passed a bill saying, yeah, you do, but it didn't affect this incident, unfortunately. So just a couple of days after they said we don't have to pay everybody back, they came up with an offer to make everybody whole, basically $63 million, which was basically the 65.5 minus the $2.5 million that maybe they've already paid out to people under their original plan. So I think that, first of all, to know that you've been overcharged on your energy bill is disturbing. To know that some people probably had their power turned off as a result of those overcharges is extremely distressing. So, and then the way they handled it was bad. So this peak demand charge, I think, is confusing to a lot of people. The reason that they are imposing it is confusing to people.
Yeah.
And for people who don't know, they say that full service customers like myself who don't have rooftop solar are subsidizing customers who do have rooftop solar and don't pay to use the entire system. So, but still get the power delivered when they need it. But there's, a good body of evidence that that's really not the case, that subsidy, when you look at the totality of it and the amount of energy that rooftop solar customers can put back into the system, I don't think that cost is being factored in to the extent that it should be, probably.
Let's back up a little bit and explain that peak demand charge, just because I think the concept is maybe similar to like how Uber does surge pricing. So when there's a lot of demand for electricity, the price per kilowatt goes up. Is that basically the idea?
Basically, they're saying that they need to know when they have to fulfill high demand usage. But the way it works is there's no time of day, and state law explicitly prohibits a rate that is based on a time of day. So what this does is it leaves it to you. So you come home from work, you turn on your air conditioner at 5:30, you turn on your TV, you maybe turn on your stove or your oven. So during that 15-minute period of your highest usage of the day, they will charge you 14 cents per kilowatt hour and then multiply that by 4 because it's for an hour, and then tack that charge on to your bill. So say you use 3 kilowatts during that 15-minute period. 3 times 14 is 42. And so 42 cents plus 42 cents for another 30 days in a 31-day month would get added. So that's about $13 for a person if you use more than 3 kilowatts, obviously it's going to be more.
And I can imagine just like for a family of 4 or 5, and you have kids coming home from school and plugging in their laptops, and then, maybe, turning on the TV, turning on the AC, you have a bigger space with more family members inside. Yeah, things can really add up.
And I think also, there's like a privilege aspect to it that it kind of reminds me of COVID when people like myself were able to stay home and work and essential workers had to go out there and, still work an 8-hour day in a grocery store or a hospital or whatever it was, and then come home. They don't have the luxury of spacing out cooking dinner and
Okay.
doing the laundry. And I'm obviously here in Las Vegas, the biggest use is going to be the air conditioning. So
Yep.
there's really no controlling that because that's going to keep cycling on whether you want it to or not. I don't think we can turn
And that's a medical necessity. I think at this point we can all acknowledge AC in July.
And if you're turning it up so far to avoid it going on, you're probably going to have some medical problems. So
Yeah.
that's really beyond our discretion to use the air conditioning.
It's interesting you mentioned that the demand surcharge is based on your own personal usage, because what this makes me think of is that, in other places where there's a demand surcharge based on time of day, like, say like 2 p.m. middle of summer is the peak time, could people theoretically try to save on their electricity bill by not putting pressure on the grid? There seems to be a logical aspect to that where it's like we're trying to preserve energy and preserve the grid at a time of high stress. Whereas this personalized sort of peak energy usage means that no matter what, you're almost guaranteed to have some sort of peak energy usage in your life, no matter what. There's almost no way to avoid that unless you can really, like you said, spread out your energy usage across the day. Like anyone's facing this peak.
If you have rooftop solar, you obviously are going to have all of the energy you need during the daytime hours, right? When the sun is shining. But when the sun sets and it's still 105 degrees out at 8 o'clock, and you no longer have the sun shining, you're going to be paying a high demand charge at that time. So it's not really like it's a break at all in fact, it's meant to basically punish rooftop solar users. And that's why there are 2 lawsuits against it, one filed by the Bureau of Consumer Protection, another filed by Vote Solar, an advocacy organization that filed up in Carson City.
Okay.
And we don't know when those suits are going to be decided, obviously. And that's the story I wrote this week, was about the potential political impacts of those lawsuits on the governor's race.
Right. We'll get to that real quick. I just want to ask one more clarifying question. Is there any environmental rationale for this new demand charge on anyone's side? I mean, even if there's any logical reason is there any way that this could actually help curtail energy usage?
The Public Utilities Commission even acknowledged that this is not the way to address the under collection from this rooftop solar customers. But they said ignoring it is not an option either. So they went ahead and did it. So no, I mean, I'm assuming if there were some sort of common sense reason behind it, they would have described that rationale, but I don't remember that happening.
All right, let's go back to your story then, Dana. You just published a story in the Nevada Current about the political implications of this rate change. Tell us about that.
Well, I was speaking with John Wellinghoff, who is a former Nevada consumer advocate, and he also was chairman of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission at one point. And after Judge Mary Kay Holthus denied the motion in February to consolidate the case that was filed in Clark County by the Bureau of Consumer Protection with the case that was filed in Carson City by Vote Solar, he called me up and he was saying, I'm surprised Aaron Ford isn't making more of this because this is really a winning issue. And he was the second person who had mentioned to me that back in 1982, before you were born, and many of your listeners were born, but I remember it because I covered it.
Yeah, I love that. We're going back in time. I'm getting my shoulder pads ready. Get the hairspray. Are you ready? There we go.
Nevada Power, which was the name of the utility up until I think 2008 or 2009. Nevada Power built this gleaming new silver building on basically the corner of Jones and West Sahara. It's just a little west of the intersection, actually.
I know it well, driven past many times.
Yeah. And Richard Bryan, who was the attorney general at the time, a Democrat, was running against our Republican governor, Robert List. And people were outraged by their power bills at the time. And Richard Bryan, who was somebody who never missed an opportunity to make a crisis political, suggested that people honk their horns when they pass by Nevada Power's brand new edifice on West Sahara. And they did. And they got T-shirts and they got signs. And at times there was a cacophony on that intersection. So a lot of people who have been here a long time will remember that. But Richard Bryan defeated Robert List by 11 percentage points. And it's the last time a Democrat has defeated a Republican incumbent in the governor's race. So it's maybe a good thing for Aaron Ford to exploit.
So this is the historical kind of precedent. What do you think that this current fight around Nevada Energy, its new name, says about the current gubernatorial race?
So just about the time that I filed my story on Tuesday, late afternoon with my editor, NV Energy, unbeknownst to me, filed a request with the Public Utilities Commission to extend the beginning of the peak demand from April 1st, which is just a few weeks away, to October 1st. And I'm not saying that this is how it happened, but obviously the governor's office knew that I was doing this story because I'd been asking them questions about it. Now, whether NV Energy did this on behalf of Joe Lombardo is supposition, but
we can't make that conclusion. We can't draw that conclusion today.
We can't draw that conclusion today.
Right.
But my editor referred to it as an in-kind contribution on NV Energy's part to Joe Lombardo. So
it does make this story even more timely, though. I will say there's some interesting synergy there.
Yeah, and another funny coincidence is that NV Energy is moving office buildings up to Summerlin. They bought a $28 million office building up there. So echoes of 1982 all over again.
Well, what are the political implications of moving that demand charge start date to October? I'm assuming we're skipping, something like, I don't know, summertime?
Yeah, that's the big one. And then by the time people get their power bill for October, the first month of the peak demand charge, it's not going to be 110 degrees out, hopefully. It's going to be much cooler. And they're not going to get those bills until after the election anyway, even if it does show up. But I don't expect the peak demand charge to rear its ugly head much, except for in the summer months. So it was a very fortuitous move on NV Energy's part for Governor Lombardo.
I see. Okay. And tell me more a little bit about the connections. Does NV Energy fund some of these gubernatorial candidates? Do we have any idea of campaign funding?
Oh, of course they do. Yeah.
Tell me more.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I didn't look up the contributions of NV Energy. All I can tell you is that Aaron Ford in January filed that he had $1.5 million on hand in his campaign account, and Governor Lombardo has $9 million, had $9 million at the time. So Governor Lombardo certainly has a fundraising lead. I think it's a good issue for Aaron Ford if he has the money to get on air and do something with it. I would imagine that NV Energy is contributing to both sides on that race. I would imagine they're hedging their bets, but I don't know what the amounts are. I haven't looked. It's a little early.
Okay. We're going to find out later on in the campaign season. It'll be interesting to keep an eye on that. Although we know historically NV Energy has given generously to candidates in the past.
And another thing that is Joe Lombardo, you could say this is a winning issue for Aaron Ford, even if he loses. The Bureau of Consumer Protection, which is suing to stop this, is under Aaron Ford's attorney general's office. So he can say, I'm going to court to stop this, right? So he can be the hero. He can also, if he loses in court, say, we're going to take it to the Supreme Court, right? And by the time it gets to the Supreme Court, the election will be a moot point. It will have already happened. So you could say Aaron Ford is a winner in this no matter what. Joe Lombardo, on the other hand, appointed the public utilities commissioners who approved this. So
The peak demand surcharge.
yes.
So the
he's
commissioners, basically the watchdogs over this surcharge, are Lombardo's appointees.
yes, exactly.
Wow.
So it puts him in a much more difficult position. So NV Energy kind of solved that for him for the time being. Now,
Hmm.
once he's reelected, I guess it really doesn't matter. But yeah, it was a good move for him.
Interesting. So do you think that with the delay of the peak surcharge to October, will AG Ford take up the standard and make this an issue as a central part of his campaign, or is it sort of less relevant to the electorate this summer?
I think it's going to be far less relevant. I think that was the intention,
Mm-hmm.
to not have it be a top of mind issue with people. If they were looking at their power bills and looking at their sample ballot at the same time,
Yeah.
it may have had an influence,
Mm-hmm.
so.
But come next summer, Power Bill 2027, I mean, that
Right.
is going to hurt. And when it comes to affordability, I think affordability is one of the top issues that our voters care about, right?
So there's also a petition online that some advocacy groups are asking people to sign and send to Governor Lombardo, asking him to derail the peak demand charge until 2027, so lawmakers can chime in on it.
Oh, interesting.
I can't see him doing that because that would indicate maybe that his PUC commissioners are not as independent as they should be, and that he holds sway over them. And as a woman named Angel DeFazio, who shows up at every PUC meeting
Hmm.
and has her issues with NV Energy, everybody at NV Energy knows who she is. And
She's their most popular gadfly, I'm guessing. Sounds like she's
yeah.
a well-known face.
And she said if Joe Lombardo were to do that, it would completely call into question not only his independence, but uh, kind of satisfy the people who say that his PUC members are already in the utilities pocket. So, or pro utility, I should say.
Gotcha. Okay. Let me ask you a quick pushback, though, because NV Energy argues that this is about equity, quote unquote, making sure that high intensity users pay their fair share. Isn't that what we do with our biggest water users in the valley, too? We have a surcharge, a higher tier for those big water guzzlers, people with the big yards and fountains and pools.
Yes, we do. Absolutely. But there are a lot of people who would tell you the impacts of that have been maybe more damaging than the positive aspects that they were intended to elicit. So we have a lot of trees that are dying in the valley because people can't afford to water them anymore. And trees, as you know, contribute shade to the environment and help keep things cool. Same thing with the removal of lawns. We've had the same effect from that. So, yeah, I think it's very comparable, but I don't think that's necessarily a good means of handling it.
I guess my other thought around that is, adding a surcharge to water usage isn't necessarily based on this peak demand, right? This is more based on overall volume of usage, right? So it's a different framework. We're not basing these peak demand charges in electricity on overall volume of electricity used. It's more based on this sort of like when your peak demand is. So, the tiny, 2-bedroom apartment renter is still getting a peak demand charge, whereas, the the tiny 2-bedroom apartment is not getting a peak water surcharge, right?
Yeah. And, NV Energy during the consumer sessions when the PUC was making this decision, NV Energy executives got up and said, we're going to educate the public about this. Now, when they came out on Wednesday and said, we're going to hold off on this until October 1st, they said, we need to educate the public. So my question is, what happened to the education efforts before this? They have pages on their website about it. And if you have an account online with NV Energy, you can already see your usage in 15-minute increments. You can already, determine what your peak demand is. So I'm not really sure. They're talking about personalized reports and stuff. Basically, you can do that yourself by just going on your computer and looking at your account. That reason for the delay just really doesn't cold water, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I guess my ultimate question to NV Energy would be like, for the family of 4 in a 2-bedroom apartment, how does this benefit them ultimately, right? How does it actually benefit our overall energy consumption to give them a surcharge? You're basically raising their rates, right? So it's not clear to me what the clear line of benefit is.
And, as I said, there's a state law that prohibits a rate that is based on the time of day. So now, when they were first charged, calling it a peak demand rate, and that issue was brought up, they changed it to a peak demand charge. So, not really sure how they'll get around that in court. It's obviously a rate if you're charging per kilowatt hour, right? So, yeah.
That's a good point. Well, one last question to wrap things up. Las Vegas has one of the highest rates of rooftop solar adoption in the country. How do you think this new billing structure changes this quote unquote return on investment for local homeowners who went solar to save money?
Well, it delays the return on their investment, obviously, because they're going to be charged more. Their service charges have gone up. And that's another thing. The alternative to this peak demand was an increase in the service charge, which was $18.50 at the time in Southern Nevada. And it was going to go up to $24 or $26. That's much less. It's about half of what the anticipated impact is expected to be. If you're looking at, an average of $13, something like that, as I mentioned, for using 3 kilowatts in that 15-minute period. So, yeah, I just don't really see where the reasoning is for imposing this, but it'll be interesting to see what happens in court. There's a hearing on March 31st, but that's just on a motion to seal some documents. So I'm assuming that came from NV Energy, but there's nothing on the docket about it.
Well, I'm sure you'll be following it, Dana, and we'll stay in touch. Always follow your reporting at The Current. Thank you so much for spending the time with us today on CityCast Las Vegas.
Thanks, Sonia. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. And that's all for today here on CityCast Las Vegas. If you enjoyed the show, go tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter. Don't forget you can support this show and get some great perks by becoming a CityCast Las Vegas neighbor at membership.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Take care.